We don't pay you to be 2 minutes late. Over the course of a year, it's hundreds of dollars. Then I find out an interesting detail. I've worked at many retail chains. Have had many terrible bosses. Here's one story I think I can give up without any repercussions. At a small specific retail store, 5 to 6 years ago at this point, I was confronted by my old boss on a specific event that I was late by 2 minutes. Previous day, he had asked me to come in on my day off, and at an earlier time than I normally do. I agreed to come in on my day off and work a shift I am not normally used to, but it's retail, it cannot be that difficult. My old boss asked me to work 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I showed up at 7:02 a.m., which, in my state, there is a 5-minute window for everyone, and this was 100% not a habit of mine at all. I am normally one to show up 5 minutes early every day and wait aside the time clock. I clocked on, and walked to my department with a drink I had already purchased the previous day. As I walked into the department, the manager greeted me, then said, "When I schedule you at 7 a.m., I expect you to be in department by 7 a.m. Not a minute later. We can't pay you to clock on, buy something, and then start working." Over the course of a year that adds up to hundreds of dollars of lost labor for one individual. I told my old boss that my drink was from the previous day, and that I just clocked on 2 minutes late. My old boss replied with, "That's not my problem, you need to plan better. You were scheduled at 7 and we are losing cost of labor each minute you are not here. Be in department at scheduled time." Which is not true. I spoke regularly with a payroll employee, and she explained to me quite some time prior, that the company does not pay you 3 minutes before or after your scheduled time. So if you clock on at 7 a.m., you are not getting paid until 7:03 a.m. If you clock on at 6:57 a.m., you are not getting paid until 7 a.m. Same for when you return from a lunch. However, if you clock on at 7:04, after that 3-minute window, you begin getting paid immediately that minute. My boss was right, I need to plan better. I asked for a printout of my timestamps going back as far as they had record of. And I tallied up each day that I had arrived 3 minutes early, and did not get paid for it. I counted well over 330 minutes within a 3-month span that I was not getting paid for, which ended up being a little over $110. I gave my old boss a copy and said, "You can pay me for these dates where I was in department, on the dot, without getting paid for it." My old boss then replied, "That's not how our company policy works." He then went into detail, to explain to me, exactly what I had already known, and gave him a copy of. Yet my old boss is now recognizing that he's contradicted himself and willingly lied to me. When everything clicked in his head that he's contradicted himself, it was far too obvious because his face went bright red and he started smiling. Emo, like he had been caught. My old boss, "Well, you know the policy, we can't pay you for that." Me, "Then I will begin my shift when I am getting paid, not the minute you schedule me." It's not like you're losing labor if you're not even paying the employees that window of time. Schedule me at 7, if you like, but I will not be clocking on until 4 minutes after the scheduled time, as you will not be losing any cost of labor for it, and I will not be losing pay over your personal policy. For about 3 weeks, I clocked on 4 minutes late every day, no matter how early I arrived. I eventually got a warning from the building's HR that it's riding the line and very close to getting a write-up, and down the discipline road. I explained to her the entire story, as she seemingly did not like this manager of mine either. She laughed pretty hard at the whole thing and offered me a department transfer, with a higher pay. She reminded me that my behavior was listed under a category that could get me terminated, and thought the transfer would be a fresh start. Instead, I put in my 2 weeks' notice and thanked her for the wonderful opportunity. The funniest part of all of this, years later I saw my old manager working at a new chain, in a similar position to what he was doing when I worked for him. He smiled, waved. I smiled, waved, continued on. As time went on, I also bumped into the old HR manager, who was working in an entirely different field. I asked her why my old boss left that company. She laughed and said, "He didn't leave, we fired him for time theft." Apparently, my old boss would take a lunch, leave the building, and never clock out for it. Now to the comments. What a lying hypocrite you worked for. I am glad that you were able to show him up, and also that he was caught for doing way worse than what he accused you of doing. OP replied, "No kidding. It felt like justice, but I hope he learned from it and is a better associate now. So the full story in his head was, I can't have other workers stealing time from the company, I need them to compensate for my time theft so it all evens out. Wage theft is illegal, definitely worth reporting it if you have proof, which you clearly did. OP replied. They're owned by different people now, thankfully. I knew someone with a job like that. They wanted you there 15 minutes early for a debrief on shift change but didn't let you clock in until your scheduled time. Took a few years but eventually they had to give everyone back pay. It was absolutely ridiculous. I worked for a private security company that did that. Didn't matter when you clocked in before your shift, you were only paid for when your shift was scheduled. If you were late, they docked it to the nearest 15. Same thing with clocking out. Clocking out after shift. Round down to nearest 15. Clocking out a few minutes early because shift change was early. Docked down to the closest 15. It was even worse there, though. Part of their business came from private communities with manned security access gates. Well, the company had this policy of using the break and lunch coverage patrol to cover call-outs or no-show. So it meant that there were times that I went days without a scheduled break. Policy was to pay 1 hour overtime for every missed break. And did I mention that in a single-person gatehouse, there wasn't a coverage officer for my legally required lunch break? We had a working lunch, i.e. got a paid lunch but had to eat at our post since we weren't allowed to leave. The company later got sued by a group of employees for unpaid wages as according to their own policies, we were due 1 hour overtime for every missed break and lunch that wasn't covered. OP replied. Here I am witching about 3 minutes lol. I hope you got something decent out of that. A long time ago I worked at a gas station and was asked to cover another shift on my day off. But I was asked about 40 minutes before the shift started, so I told the store manager that I can do it, but I would be about 15 to 20 minutes late. Well, when I come in and try to clock in, only to be greeted by the store manager berating me for coming in late and how important coming in on time was. I tried to clock in, but she kept cutting me off and standing in my way, so I being tried because I only had around 4 to 5 hours of sleep over the last 2 days, turned around and left. Since she was the manager on duty, and the only other employee in the store, she had to cover the shift instead. I did this at my last work as well, was asked to come in on my day off, just shortly before it was supposed to start. Told them sure, but with transportation to work, I will be 20 minutes late. Showed up, and managed got pissed I was late. Told her straight up it was my day off, I just got called, and couldn't have made it here any faster. If she had a problem with that, then she could complain to the boss. Seems she did. 10 minutes later I was called into a meeting for being late. Got reamed, without any way to tell my side of the story. Then I was asked by my boss how I planned to avoid this problem in the future. I responded that that was easy, I would never come in on my day off again. And if the workplace needed me here post haste, but I couldn't make it on time because they called too late, then I would just decline. Because, if coming in on my day off, with being called just pre-start time and no way to make it on time, and that even getting okayed over the phone, then it was easy to just never help again if they call. Problem solved. I think my boss just about blew a gasket at my manager. He was pissed he didn't get the full story before emailing me a new one. I quite naturally told them they could find someone else to find that day's shift, as I had quite enough that day. At the time what annoyed me most was that she was blocking me from clocking in. I was basically a zombie due to midterms and the lack of sleep, but I did put together, not clocked in equals not getting paid equals rather be sleep. The store manager basically retaliated by giving me split shifts, which I would cover one if I felt like it, then I would call out on the other until I was fired, but I had a new job already lined up by the edit. Before this nonsense, I was actually a decent employee, I always showed up on time, mostly, traffic etc. Did what I could. No, I cannot mop the whole store in the middle of the workday, and my tile was never off. Once upon a time, I had a manager who would check the time clock app on our cash registers and manually edit everyone's times while muttering, "Nope, he took longer than that. She took longer than that too," etc. She got to my name and I told her that I print receipts every time I click in or out and would sue her pants off if she altered mine. Then I spread the word to everyone else that she was stealing minutes of their pay every day, and they should print receipts too. Many years later, I was working a job that didn't have a time clock at all. I was the only non-salaried employee and simply wrote my hours on a timesheet and got paid appropriately. Everyone worked 8 to 5 with staggered 1-hour lunch breaks. I was always the last one to get a lunch break and my boss would always tell me to wait until the last salaried employee came back from his break before taking mine, and run a bunch of errands on my way back. The guy before me would go home and play PS3 for an hour, then go shopping for lunch and sit in the break room meeting for another hour. I considered his break over when he returned with his sandwich. I'd pre-order my lunch, pick it up, eat it in the car while running the errands, then return to work and browse Reddit on my phone for an hour. The salaried guy was usually still in the break room when I returned, and the boss would see both of us sitting on ass, playing on our phones and get mad. Upon realizing I had already completed all of my errands and ate, but the guy who started his break before me was still eating, he'd direct his anger at the right employee and then challenge me to a game of words with friend. Errands for the company on your lunch break? That's wage theft, dude. Highly illegal. You should report it even today. It depends on the setup. He wasn't punching a clock, so it sounds like he got his hour lunch, plus time to be out and about running the errands, which wouldn't fall under the unpaid hour. It can be cool if you don't abuse it on either end. Sure, I'll run to Lowe's and grab some shit for you, but I'm getting what I need too, so add 15 minutes to when you expect me back.